Greetings and welcome. We now turn to the great Aristotle and to his Poetics. And we also turn to an assignment that will ask us to take the concepts of Poetics and to apply them to a viewing text. Not a written text, not a read text, but a viewing text of film. In the abstract, or in the broadest way, let's say it this way. We want you to look at a film. We want you to critique that film using the principles of Aristotle's Poetics. Please note, we're not asking you if you like the movie or not. Aristotle really didn't have much interest in liking or not liking a work of art. Okay? His aesthetics theory is, we would say today, kind of quasi-scientific. Okay? So he's going to give us some kind of hardcore reasons why. Principles, shall we use that term? Principles from which you will extrapolate some understanding of whether a work of art is, can I say, worthy, meritable? Okay, that is to say, can we give it an Academy Award versus saying it's not worth that kind of an award? On what grounds would you do that? I will today do two things. One, I will introduce you to Aristotle's Poetics, and by extension, if you're going to talk Poetics, you have to talk the great Sophoclean drama, Oedipus Rex. I will gesture a little bit towards Antigone if I have time. Okay? After I've done that, I will then use the concepts to do the very thing I'm going to ask you to do. In other words, I'm going to kind of model for you what I'm going to ask you to do back for me. And I'm going to try to apply the concepts of Poetics to the film Titanic. As I said, I think in a lecture yesterday, a film which statistically and economically has been considered one of the greatest films of all time. It's certainly collected a lot of money. We're interested in answering the simple question, how can you apply the ideas of Poetics to a text like that? So if you're paying any kind of attention, you'll draw two things out of my conversation here. One, you'll understand what Aristotle said in Poetics about good tragedy, using especially the play Oedipus Rex. Okay? That's the play that he himself referenced as the greatest single work of drama. And then secondly, you'll have some sense of how to critique another work of art. Now, I will tell you in advance that many of my students have reported that this lecture ruins them in this regards. It's very possible after you hear this lecture that you will never look at a film again the same way. I am open to that accusation, and I will tell you in advance it's probably true. That's what Aristotle does. That's what all great thinkers do. They give you an idea which, after you've heard it and start to think about it, the world doesn't look the same anymore. It somehow shifts a little bit. You can look at, for example, at the same movie, but now you're going to see it differently because you know your Aristotle. All right, so let's go to it. What does Aristotle have to say in Poetics that's of such great importance? Well, first of all, let's point out, okay, that his text Poetics is, again, not about poetry, although the name itself sounds that way. His text Poetics, rather, is about drama, or what we will call for our text here, film, okay? So we're going to ask drama, all right? And then we're going to ask, what is it that makes great drama? Or can we ask it in even a more accelerated kind of question, what is the greatest drama? And his answer is Oedipus Rex. Okay? He says Oedipus Rex is without a doubt the greatest play of all time. Well, what is this play? Well, a couple of quick observations. One of the greatest playwrights of the Greek era is a cat named Sophocles. Now, we don't want to confuse this with Socrates. Socrates is the great philosopher. Sophocles is a playwright who writes an amazing trilogy. Okay, that's 3 plays. The first of those plays is called Oedipus Rex. Rex is just Latin for king, King Oedipus. The second is a play called Oedipus at Colonus. Okay, and then the third of the trilogy is called Antigone. All right, these 3 plays go together. You can't really watch and appreciate the play Antigone without knowing Oedipus Rex for sure, and Oedipus at Colonus to some degree. Okay? Well, what is this play Oedipus Rex all about? Well, let's do a quick plot summary, shall we? So now I'm just going to summarize the play for you. I know you're reading the play, so this will be a nice skim out to help you read the play. Well, we are in a famous city, the city of Thebes. And there is a famous king. His name is Laius, and he has a beautiful, beautiful wife, Jacusta. And they have a son. On a stormy night, this will sound quasi-familiar as a motif from the Troy tale. And into the room where the child has been born comes the old blind prophet Tiresias, who immediately says to Laius, the king of Thebes, bad news, this kid. You better kill him. Get rid of him. Laius is like, dude, I'm not going to kill my own son. No, he says, you need to do this. If you don't do this, this boy is going to grow up. He's going to kill you. He's going to marry your wife, his mother, and he's going to have children. Now, I should point out that if this story is an Egyptian story, the notion of incest to some degree, you'll remember, between, for example, families, is acceptable far more than it is in Greek society. Incest is major taboo in Greek society. In other words, this is not a good thing. Of course, Laius himself's not interested in hearing Tiresias say his boy's going to grow up to kill him either. And so Laius does the next best thing to outright killing his boy. He takes the boy out on a mountainside, he leaves him there tied up, his little feet swell, which is what Oedipus, the actual word, means. There is, of course, by extension, a sexual rendering here, Oedipus. But his feet swell, and in the process, he almost dies, but he doesn't die. Laius goes back to check later, finds the body missing, and assumes death. The boy isn't dead. He's found by a shepherd who will raise the foundling on his own. Key for your notes. Oedipus is never told he's a foundling. He assumes that his father and mother are these little shepherd people who raise him outside of a city called Corinth, which is a city nearby Thebes. But, as we pointed out with Paris, when you're born the son of a king, you grow up to look like the son of a king. You grow up to look stunningly handsome, Brad Pitt-esque. And sure enough, Oedipus does. He is stunning. And when he's a young man, he's at a party having a good time. And he stumbles out of the party, and he bumps into this old man who immediately recoils from him. And the old man looks at him and says, "Ooh, you are cursed." Oedipus is like, "What are you talking about? Look at me. I can get any girl I want." He goes, No, you are cursed. You're going to kill your dad and marry your mom, have kids with her." Oedipus is like, whoa. His buddy says, "This cat you want to believe. He's a prophet. You do not want to doubt what he has to say. You are in trouble." Oedipus is like, "Well, I can't do that." So under cover of night, he decides to run away. So he does. He leaves his mom and his dad. He doesn't tell them. He just goes. His thinking is simple. If I'm going to kill my dad and marry my ma, have kids with her, I'm just going to go ahead now and just leave town. Great idea, right? I'll go to another place. He's walking down the road. He comes to a place called the Crossroads, which is kind of similar to what we have here behind our school, where two major roads intersect. As he's walking, he sees the chariot coming, and he sees the old fart in the chariot saying, "Get out of the way!" Oedipus, however, he has a temper, shall we say it, like his old man. He's like, "You get out of the way." And the old man says, "Wait, wrong answer, son. You get out of the way." Pulls the chariot over. There is a servant, by the way, on the back of the chariot. He's like, "Oh no, this guy's going at it again." And he runs away. It's like, here it goes again. We're going to have a war. And he runs away. Where? In the trees, he turns and watches what happens. Well, what happens is kind of tragic. The old man lunges at the young man jacks him. Next thing you know, the old man is dead. Oedipus is like, that's sad, but dude, I mean, he came at me and he didn't pull his chariot to the other side. It ain't my fault. Oedipus walks down the road a little bit further, and there's this large monster there. This kind of sphinx monster. It's kind of like a half lion, half serpent, kind of nasty monster. And the sphinx monster says to him, "You're not going anywhere. I put a curse on this city that's right behind me. It's the city of Thebes. You're going nowhere. Unless you can answer a question from me. I got a riddle for you called, of course, the famous riddle of the Sphinx. And Oedipus says, well, like, what do I get if I answer the riddle? He says, what you get is me leaving and you freeing the city of Thebes, which is probably not a bad idea for you to try. Oedipus is like, all right, yeah, sure. I'm good with questions. What? He said, here's my riddle for you. By the way, if you don't get the riddle, I kill you. Oedipus is like, all right, whatever. And he asks the riddle of the famous riddle of the Sphinx. What animal walks on 4 legs in the morning, on 2 legs in the noontime, and on 3 legs in the evening? And Oedipus is like, an animal that walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the noontime, and on 3 legs in the evening. And Oedipus immediately realizes, because he studied hard in his AP English class, we're dealing with metaphor here. I gotcha. That sounds kind of like a human being who in the morning, birth of his or her life, crawls on all 4s, 4 legs. In the noontime of life, where we now are, 2 legs. But in the evening of life, has to use the walking stick as he gets older. 3 legs. To which the Sphinx says, dude, you are one sharp cookie. And he leaves the city of Thebes. Alleviating the plague, hurrah, everything's going great. Out of the city comes the drop-dead gorgeous queen, her name is Jacusta, who says to Oedipus, wow, you are some kind of intellect. You're also stunningly handsome. And I just received news that my husband has died and we don't have a king for this amazing city. What do you say? You want to become king for more than a day? And you get me as well. To which Oedipus is like, sweet, I'm having the best of days, with the exception of that old fart next to the side of the road at the crossroads there. I'm having man, I'm glad I left Corinth. This is awesome. He marries Jacusta and he has 4 children. 2 sons and 2 daughters. Polynices, Eutocles, of course, his 2 boys. Ismene and Antigone, his 2 girls. His life is going great. Great. I mean, he has the most amazing life. He's totally respected in the city. He has 4 stunningly beautiful children. His wife, Jacusta, loves him. And then all of a sudden, a plague hits the city. He's like, what's going on? And he calls in a prophet, and the prophet says, well, you got a problem. The preceding king of Thebes, his name was Laius, he was killed. And whoever killed him has not been brought to justice. So the city is under plague until you bring him to justice. And in what is obviously what we mean when we talk about dramatic onstage irony, Oedipus stands in front of the citizens of Thebes and says, I will get to the bottom of who killed this old king. And he promised me, I promise you, he will not go unpunished. I will bring him to justice. Of course, the audience knows what poor Oedipus doesn't know. Now, I want to point out something here, because sometimes modern viewers of this play have the tendency to go, ooh, yuck, he killed his dad and married his mom and had 4 kids. Ooh, sick. But wait a minute, you're totally missing it. This is not a play about a cat who wakes up one morning and says, man, my mom is hot. I'm going to kill my dad and marry her and have 4 kids. No, no, no. That would be a different kind of play, you'd have to agree. That's a different kind of play and a different kind of character in Oedipus. The best way I can wrap your brain around what's going on is this. You go off to college. Where? You're at the party. Where? You meet this stunning person. You guys start hanging out. You finish each other's sentences. The person is stunningly beautiful, but also so unbelievably kind and nice. It doesn't take long for the 2 of you to hook up, and finally you decide you're going to marry, and you have children. And it's amazing. Your life is like so unbelievably amazing. You both have amazing jobs. Your kids, let's just say you have 4 of them. How about this? 2 sons and 2 daughters. And those 4 kids are like amazing kids. And you're like, I mean, every morning you wake up, you're like, dude, I have the most amazing life. When you get a letter that says, Surprise! When you were born with a twin. Who was your opposite gender. But at the moment of birth, you were separated and raised in two different places. But we want to let you know that you do have a twin out there somewhere. He or she is somewhere out there. Now, the only reason why any of you are going, ugh, is because you know the play Oedipus Rex. If I hadn't told you the play Oedipus Rex, you'd be like, oh, that is so awesome. So, like, you've got this brother or sister out there somewhere. Isn't that great? Dude, I'm going to, sure enough, that's in the story. That's what you do. You go, dude, I'm going to start doing networking and Google searches, and you go to all those places. What do you know? Come to find out. Your brother, sister, whoa, went to the same university as you? What are the odds? Yeah, what are the odds? That's this play. Oedipus has no idea, zero clue of what he's done. That's going to make this play a powerful play, because he's got no clue, no idea. Well, the play is going to descend very quickly now into the abyss. It doesn't take Jacusta long to start, she kind of starts putting it all together. His mother, his wife mother, it's hard to know what to call her. And so at some point in the play, she starts to say to Oedipus, you know, honey, I just think maybe we should just leave this alone. Let sleeping dogs lie. Let's just, no. Oedipus, no. I made a promise. I'm going to follow this through to the end. Oedipus is a man of tremendous pride. He's going to do the right thing. He's going to get to the bottom of it. Two messengers show up. The first one is from Corinth, who says, I got bad news. Your mom and dad, they're dead. But I got good news. You don't got to worry about that curse thing about marrying your mom after you kill your dad. Second messenger shows up and says, yeah, they weren't your mom and dad. They actually found you. It's at this point Jacusta's like, honey? And Oedipus is like, shh, I'm listening. I'm taking notes. You know, Jacusta's like, I don't think you should listen anymore. No, I want to know. I already said I want to know. So she leaves the stage. As the next messenger comes on board and says, Ho! Looks at him. Ho, you're the guy. You're the guy. This is the messenger servant who was on the back of the chariot, who watched the altercation at the crossroads. And he says, Laius, our old king, he was killed by you. You're the guy. It's at that point, another messenger comes on stage and says to Oedipus, Jacusta is not alive. Oedipus goes into the bedroom where he finds his wife mother there. She has hung herself, committed suicide. Talk about your dysfunctional family. Oedipus considers killing himself, but instead what he does is he takes the brooches that hold her gown up, that have long pokey things on the back of them, and he shoves them into his eyes, and he blinds himself. Note the irony. At the moment he goes blind, he sees. Right? At the moment that he sees, he goes blind. Well, immediately you got a problem. Who's going to run the show after Oedipus is no longer obviously king? The two sons of Oedipus have every right to the throne, and they step forward. Polynices and Artocles step forward and say, one of the two of us has got to now become the king. They get ready to fight, and they leave town. Ismene, one of the daughters of Oedipus, is just totally embarrassed. She's like, seriously? And so she just leaves. Leaving Oedipus blinded and alone with only Antigone. She's the only one that will stay with him. And at the end of the play, we see Oedipus being let off. He is completely shattered old man, broken in every way, as you can imagine. Has no eyes, he's a broken man physically, can hardly walk, and the grief. His daughter has to lead him off stage. And Jacusta's brother, Creon, has now taken over as king. Where? Creon says to Oedipus, leave Thebes and don't ever come back. Oedipus says, I will do that on one condition, and that's this. You promise me you'll take care of my 4 kids and don't let anything bad happen to them. Creon says, I swear by the gods, I'll let nothing bad happen to your children as long as you promise to never come back. And he leaves. End of Oedipus Rex. By the way, briefly, Oedipus at Colonus is the story of Oedipus living outside of the city of Thebes in like a grove, where 2 things of importance happens. One, he finds out that his 2 sons have killed each other. Again, talk about your dysfunctional family. Killed each other outside the walls of Thebes, fighting for who would be in power. And then secondly and importantly, Oedipus has an interesting ascension moment at his death, where, he kind of dies. And that's the important thing about Oedipus at Colonus. Oedipus dies. Antigone, of course, is the final play of the trilogy, one that I think you studied when you were a sophomore. And we'll have more to say about that play later. But, of course, you know that Antigone has everything to do with an edict given by Creon that one of the 2 brothers of Oedipus will be properly buried. The other will not be properly buried because he was fighting against the city of Thebes. The one who buries that body will be himself killed. And Antigone will elect to bury the body of her brother, and in the process of so doing, create all kinds of problems. Now, that's the play. We now work very quickly with the principles from Poetics as they relate to this play, Oedipus Rex. What makes a great drama? Aristotle will study the play Oedipus Rex, and he will say, several key characteristics make this play so dynamic. Let's outline them, shall we? First of all, you have to have a protagonist. Now, let's identify what that means. The protagonist is the character in the play with whom the audience most identifies. Okay? Now, what does that word identifies mean? What does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that they like him. It means they can relate to him. That's a great way to say it, Bert. Yeah, they relate to that character. In what way do they relate to that character? Well, this protagonist has got to go through a certain kind of journey. Not a physical journey necessarily, a spiritual journey, we might say, where the character begins what we will say high. That is to say, respected, in a lofty position. But by the end of the play is low or ruined in some way. Now, this process is what we will call a tragic fall. Okay? A fall. Where, at one point, everything seems to be going well, but by the end of the text, bad. Okay? Now, what leads to this fall is hubris. All right? Okay? Another term he uses, of course, is hamartia, right? This tragic flaw, right? Now, here's the deal. Aristotle is brilliant in this observation, and he continues to inform much of what we think about in regards to aesthetic theory. He says it this way. You go to the middle school to watch a play. You sit down. You're watching the play. You're watching the actors performing on stage. You believe that you are the audience and the actors are the actors playing up on stage. But Aristotle says something fundamentally important. He says you've got it all wrong. The real actors are not the ones on stage. The real actors in a dramatic performance are the ones sitting in the audience. That's where the real action takes place. It isn't up on stage. It's the people sitting, watching. Watching? Why come? Because the actors are presenting what, for Aristotle, is like a mirror. It's like holding up a mirror. The people sitting in the audience look into the mirror and see reflected back themselves. the real action of a play happen here, sitting in the performance, as the performance is going on, in the audience. The audience is the key. Why is the audience the key? Aristotle asking this question. Why? What happens with the audience watching the play? He says, well, think about the play Oedipus Rex. While the audience is watching, the audience can know everything that's going on. Sophocles didn't invent the story of Oedipus Rex, right? They can know. Oedipus he's killed his dad, he's married his mom, he's had 4 kids. When he stands in front of you, he says, I will get to the bottom of it. The audience members all know the one who's guilty is the one talking. Got me? What's interesting for Aristotle is not the action on stage, but rather the action in the psyche of the audience members. In what way? Well, they relate with this protagonist's fall. How so? In 2 ways. 1, fear. 2, pity. Okay? Fear and pity. Well, what's this fear thing about? Well, you're watching this play, Oedipus Rex, and you go, oh man, that would suck. That story I just told some of you about marrying your twin. I mean, the minute you hear a story like that, you're just like, because see, no matter how much you would say, I would never do that. The reality is, all of that story is linked on one simple fact. You don't really know about your birth. You know what they told you about your birth. You don't know about your birth. There's no way to know that, right? So you just kind of assume that what people told you was true. Just like Oedipus. He assumed that his mom and dad were shepherds, right? So through the process of watching Oedipus Rex, you can begin to grow afraid because you're aware of how fragile you are in a universe of chaos. The way in which you have so little control over the events that happen in your life. You think you have control until events start happening in your life that prove you've got no control. Which is why when anyone close to you dies, you have that powerful response that first and foremost is the response of fear. Crap. If they have to go, I have to go someday. I wonder how that will happen. You're right. See, and Aristotle says psychologically, fear of death, fear of loss, it plagues us all the time. Which Freud said is the reason why some of you right now have stuff sticking in your mouth that you're biting on. Or you'll do it later. Or you do one of these all the time. Because we're constantly full of anxiety and fear about, in a phrase, the unknown. What we don't know is coming. Or what we fear that we know is coming. Namely, of course, our immortality. Right? That is to say, what's the difference between you and a fly? Only one of you know about fly swatters. Boy, oh boy, I've just said something really profound. The only difference between you and a fly, flies don't know about fly swatters. They will move from your hand instinctively, but they go right back. They don't know fly swatters exist. You do. You do. From the time you lost your first goldfish or your puppy dog or your kitty cat or somebody close to you within your family, you learned early on about fly swatters. You knew there's this thing called mortality or death. And from the time you learn it, you're somehow fundamentally different from all other species on this planet. No other species knows about fly swatters but you, human. Aristotle says that makes you different in a fundamental way. That makes you significantly different from your dog or your cat, who knows all about food, and knows all about fun, and knows all about all the other stuff. What your dog doesn't know is that someday it ain't going to be anymore. See, your dog doesn't know that. Your dog doesn't wake up every morning and go, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Right? Doesn't happen that way. Humans, on the other hand, and by the way, for those of you that have ever seen one animal lose another animal, you'll know this. They walk up, they smell, and then they walk away. There isn't a grieving because there's no recognition of exactly what it is that just happened. Humans, totally different. Humans have a different understanding because they know the future in regards to mortality. All right, what's up with this pity thing? Well, this one is fascinating. Okay? This one is called pathos in the Greek. Pathos. It's where we get our word pathetic from, and pity and sympathy and all of that. It runs something like this. It's like I was lecturing this to an honors group of ninth graders once, and a student said, it's basically, I'm glad it happened to him and not to me. Well, yeah, okay, that's kind of it. Sympathy, pity says something like this. Man, I feel so bad for Oedipus. That's so terrible. He honestly wants to do the right thing. He's like totally trying to do the right thing in every way, and it's going to ruin him. The knowledge is going to destroy him. Why doesn't he just stop? Because he can't stop, because he's a good guy. He wants to be a good king. So he's going to keep going. But in the process of keep going, oh man, that's so sad to watch this. In the process of watching this happen, you have what Aristotle called catharsis. Now what is that? Catharsis, or purgation, to purge. Purge, that's what the word actually means. Aristotle says it this way. He says you're watching Oedipus go through his fall. As you do that, powerful emotions are released by the audience members. The better the job the actors do, the better the play or the drama is in the audience. Where powerful emotions are released. As you watch this downfall, you cannot help but have this cathartic, purgative experience. Which is why, two things. One, you weep. That's why you weep. Because you know, or of course, if you've been taught that you're not supposed to cry, you show another kind of emotion. See, Aristotle says, you know, we all show these releases of emotion. Guys who say they don't believe in that kind of thing, watch them at a Broncos game, jumping up and down, screaming. At some point, you could obviously look at them, as my wife has said often, let me get this straight. Grown men paid millions of dollars to run a little ball across a white line. And anybody cares about this? Seriously? All of us care about something where there's this powerful release of emotion. You ready for this? Aristotle says that's what makes you human. The minute you lose the capacity for that, you're no longer human. We will, of course, later, in the epoch of psychoanalytic theory and psychology, say individuals who lack this capacity of pathos are certifiable. That's what makes them insane. They don't have any capacity to take the other side, to have sympathy for another. Fundamentally, Aristotle says that's what makes us human. That's why we're different from other life forms on this planet. We have this capacity of catharsis or purgation. Well, that's the idea. Does it work? 2 years before the release of Titanic, I was in Japan. I travel there often, and they're huge Leonardo fans over there. And I was already hearing about this film. And by the time the film was released, there was huge debate about it in the theaters. Would it succeed? Would it not succeed? The people who were involved in it had all said they didn't think it would succeed. Even the writer and the producer of the play, James Cameron, had said, I kind of doubt it, because it's long, and it's about the boat sinks. It's about a boat that sinks. I mean, basically, that's just what it's about. And then the phenom happened. And it was a phenom. In Whirlin alone, that film sold out for the first 9 nights. Every showing sold out. Completely sold out. This was not because Whirlin people, you know, or somehow... No, that was happening all over the planet. Wherever this film was shown, people were showing up, it was selling out, and then, interestingly, they were going back to see it again. As a social scientist, I intentionally stayed away for a week. I wanted to ask people who went to it, what was it like? And they said, 2 things. It's a really long film, but it felt like it was like a really short film. And when I finished watching the film, I was really, really tired. My colleagues and my students kept saying this. I was really tired. It was like, one of my students said, who was a runner, she said, I felt like I'd been running for 3 hours. I was just physically exhausted by the time I was to the end of the film. And then the second thing was, people said after the film, people were just kind of standing around in the foyer or out in the parking lot. It was like they didn't know what to say. They were like, wow, that was something. They couldn't talk about it. It was kind of weird. They couldn't, you know, it was like to say that was a good film seemed kind of like stupid to say, like it gets dark at night, you know? And so nobody knew what to say about the film. It's like people would go, what do you think about it? And they would go, and then they go back. They want to go back again. A 3-hour film where you can reduce the plot line to the boat sinks. Begging the obvious question, why? Why was this film so popular? all of the actors who had performed in films before, none of those films had grossed this kind of money or had this kind of attention. Films about historical events, while doing well, none of them before or after were able to do the same thing. So why? What is it about this text that makes it so powerful? I think Aristotle's the only way to answer that, and I think Poetics is the only way to answer that question. Let's talk about it in our final seconds. What makes Titanic such a provocative text? Aristotle would say, well, let's study what happens in the film. When you're watching the movie in a theater, and that's, again, I'm premising my observations on this way. When you're watching the film in a theater, you're sitting there with 500 or more other people, right? At any given moment in the movie, right? Especially at those most exciting moments. You know, the guy tumbles down, bang, he hits, down into the water he goes, right? You could walk up next to somebody sitting in the theater watching and go, hey, dude, just so you know, that's not real. They made models and stuff, and that's all computerized stuff. It's not like somebody actually died. You're okay. No, I know that. Well, I don't know, dude. You look like you were way into this. No, I know that. It's not real. I just want to make sure you know that. It's not real. It's just made up. The way little children will turn to an adult in the middle of a film when they get a little freaked out and go, this isn't real, right? You go, right, it's not real. And yet, in the middle of the most provocative scenes in this film, the audience cannot help but begin to identify with a powerful moment. What moment? The moment when the boat's going down. Right? We've spent an entire hour and a half, almost 2 hours, waiting for this moment in this film. When? The boat's going to sink. And we know not everybody's going to get off that boat. Right? Notice even in terms of the geography of the boat itself, you got certain people who are going to get off, and you other people who are not going to get off. And it begs a really interesting question to an audience member. What would I do in a moment like this, when I know I'm about to drown in the icy waters of the North Atlantic? I know it's going down, and I know I have no escape. What would I do? And then notice how the film offers options. One option, of course, is the weaselly guy finds his way onto the boat so he doesn't have to die. And then there are other options, right? For example, you have people lying underneath in their room. You know, you have that powerful single shot where you have the mother talking to her kids because they're about to die, right? Now, here's the thing. It begs an obvious question. In a moment like that, how would I respond? We all would like to think, right, that we would be, no, you go, you can get in the boat. It's fine, I'll drown in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. It's fine. I've heard it's the worst way to die, but how would anyone know? It's okay. You go. I will stay and swallow water, and die a terrible death. We'd like to think we'd be that person, but psychologically we go, I just don't know. I don't know would I be that? I would like to think I would be that person. I could be, in the moment, heroic. But I just don't know. Right? To that degree, two things. A lot of fatigue at the end of a film. Why? You're sitting in an audience with all these other people thinking and wondering the same thing collectively. See, that's different from watching Titanic in your living room on Netflix. See, when you're sitting in a room, a darkened room, watching this text, you're communicating without speaking. And Aristotle says it this way. With all of these people, you are engaged in the same activity together. And you've suspended your criticism that you know this is not real. Because you are engaged in a profoundly spiritual question. What's the final moment like? And how would I deal with it? And in the process, powerful release of emotions, catharsis, purgation occurring. Now that's Titanic. What I want you to do is I want you to look at a film of your choosing, but you want to make sure that it has a few things in it. Clearly, you want to make sure it has an identifiable protagonist with whom an audience can identify and engage in the process of catharsis. You'll do two things in your paper. One, you'll briefly summarize the film that you are working with. Two, you will then itemize or look at the film as a work of Aristotelian dimensions. In other words, Do you in fact see this powerful catharsis happening? By the way, if you don't see it, you're not critiquing that film. Got me? You must choose a film that has an identifiable Aristotelian purgation or catharsis in play. Now again, I will tell you what I said at the beginning of my lecture. From this point on, you're going to begin to find yourself watching texts now going, there's a whole lot of Aristotelian stuff happening in this text with all kinds of purgation of the fall of the protagonist. The audience has to somehow identify with that fall, right? The way we can say it is this. The more powerful the mirror is of the action, so that the audience can identify. That's the key word. It is the key word on my whiteboard. So the audience can identify. You see, this is a fair question. If I were to ask you to write down the 10 movies that move you the most, we could guess, Aristotle would say, you somehow identify with either the protagonist or with the fall of the protagonist or with the catharsis that's related to that fall. In other words, it moves you in some way. I want you to find that text and I want you to write about that text. Due when? Tuesday. Due on Tuesday. All right? Due on Tuesday. Okay? Now, if you want, you can always stop in.